we are going to get our character to move finally. The goal is to get this guy to jump and to walk. We're going to talk about animation tools, all these keyframe possibilities down here, how switch layers work, how walk cycles work. We're going to get into some principles, and then some more advanced things like smart bones and squash and stretch that are only available on the Pro version. We're going to do a 5-second animation that's a sample, and then you're going to apply these ideas and principles to your final animation. Let's take a look at the timeline first. We've been working in frame 0 as we rig and set up our character, and you can do these practice poses and everything. But it's not animating anything until you move forward to frame 1 through whatever. You can do that with the right arrow. You can go forward and backward 1 frame at a time. But once you go into that zone, then you're starting to animate, and you can see these dots are showing up. Those keyframes mean that you're animating things. So just know if you're on frame 0 and it doesn't do anything, that's pretty normal. Frame 1 and beyond is animation. Taking a look at the numbers here, you have these numbers on top. These are the number of frames, and then these big numbers right here are the number of seconds. So we can set however long of a time span or work area that we want. And you can determine the frame rate. We set it up to be 12. So right now we have a 5-second video at 60 frames. If you divided 60 by 5, that would be 12 frames per second. You can simply change that work area by Alt or Option right-clicking and setting a new out point. Or you can go to File, Movie Settings, and change it here, End Frame, if you like. Another thing to take a look at is on the timeline area is a marker. Let's say we wanted to tell ourselves, hey, I want to do something here at 1 second. I would go to the time and I would click on this little guy here and I would label it. Let's say jump. Let's say I go forward and I can scrub right here to 3. I can do another marker and let's say walk. Animation tools we'll be using are the Manipulate Bone tool, or Z on your keyboard, Transform Bone tool, or T. We can also transform a layer if we want to. And then finally, if you really want to, you can animate points using the Transform Points tool or the Curvature tool as well. So you really can't animate anything, but we'll try to stick to those, primarily the Manipulate Bone tool. First, you got to select your bone layer. And you do have to be on the first frame, frame 1, not frame 0, in order to get some animation going. So let's take a look at what these two or three tools do. Manipulate Bone is the one where you can rotate a bone. So if you have your character rigged, you can rotate any bone that you see, and you can start seeing these keyframes pop up over here. And that means you're animating. Okay, anything you move, you can rotate or move around. The Transform Bone tool is similar. You can curve and rotate bones, but you can also move the location of the bone or the length of the bone. So there's a little more there, a little more ability there. And then finally, if you go to a layer that has points to it and you wanted to animate points, let's say I grab this point. Okay, you can see a keyframe was added. Let's say over time I want this to move. It can be animated. So really think about it. You can animate all sorts of things. The one that can be confusing is that you can also animate a layer. So right now, if I was to twirl this up, this entire bone layer is one layer. Every layer in here is one layer. Every layer here is one layer. You can move any layer in 3 ways, just like in After Effects. Transform Layer tool, you can move or reposition, you can resize, or you can rotate. And all of those are animatable qualities. So if you wanted the hair, let's say to move from here, I would click to add a keyframe, and you want it to move there. That's also animatable. So anything you want to do, whether it's a layer animation, a point animation, or a bone animation, is possible over time. Keyframes can be added in multiple ways, and they will be automatically added for you once you start animating. The first way I like to think about it is if I wanted to freeze a pose, then I would tell the computer to say freeze this right here, and you can do it two ways. You can either press Command F, Control F, or you can go to the bone menu and freeze pose. So I'm going to do this at 1 second. It's going to freeze the pose, meaning that it's stuck there from here to here. It's going to freeze all of the bones. That's what it's going to do. If you get the wiggle there, don't worry about that. Let's pretend that's not happening. It's freezing the pose. So that means that I can start from here and I can animate from there more easily. What it did is it added keyframes. So these dots are keyframes. There are different types of keyframes in this program. Just like After Effects, you can do different interpolation to them. This button right here is set to smooth. This is the default keyframe that will be added every time. So if I was to make a move with the Manipulate Bone tool, you can see that there's some circles that are similar that are added. If I were to change the default interpolation, let's say to ease in and out, I would add some animation, and you can see these look a little different. So play with those styles. I usually try to keep it to smooth. It's a nice one, but there's all sorts of fun ways to do that. You can also change a keyframe by selecting them and right-clicking and then changing them there. So if you wanted to change the type of keyframe, that's how you would do it. Selections are tricky. Let's say if I made an animation with just this bone, that's all I'm moving, over from 1 second to 2 seconds. That's really the only bone that I'm moving. The body's moving, but that's the only bone that's been animated. If I selected with my Select Bone tool, if I selected this bone, in the red channel, that's the selected bone information, there is no second keyframe because I don't have any animation on that bone. But if I select this bone, there is animation. Every single bone has a selected bone channel. Every single point has a selected point channel. So you can go in and edit if you can think about, all right, based on my selection, select bone, based on my selection, I can see, is there animation in that? No. Is there animation in that? There is. Looking further, you can animate these three channels: selected bone scale, translation, or bone angle. So freezing a bone and then animating one bone, selecting it, taking a look at it is pretty valuable. Anticipation and follow-through are two principles that we're going to work on with character animation. Think of these two as the action before and after the actual action. So let's say we're going to do a jump. We would like this character to jump, right? But the anticipation of a jump is usually you're going to squat down and get ready and prepare for the action. Follow through is after the action. So after the person lands, they're going to squat down a little bit and bounce back up and recover. Anticipation and follow through happen on every action. And the more time you spend thinking about these two principles, the better your animation will get. It'll be more satisfying and more realistic. Real quick, if I wanted to clear my animation from any point, I would go to that point and go to Animation, Clear Animation, and then you get some choices. From Document, after current frame is what I want. I want to clear everything, even eye blinks or anything that you've been seeing so far. It's going to wipe everything out. So it's kind of a dangerous one, but that's what we need right now. I'm going to go forward 1 frame and freeze my pose on frame 0. Okay, it should add a bunch of keyframes there. I'm going to go forward probably just to 1 second, and then I'm going to freeze my pose again, Command or Control F. Okay, let's talk about the anticipation step. Maybe he takes a whole second to jump. So maybe I go forward 1 or 2 frames in anticipation. 1, 2. With my Manipulate Bone tool, Z, I'm going to take this control bone and bring it down. Another thing that he could anticipate would be his arms. Maybe the arms kind of come up like he's really trying to get a good jump out of this. So I go forward and backward all the time to check out my animation. And it's automatically added keyframes for me. Okay, that looks pretty good. I'm going to take one more frame and I'm going to come down just a little bit more, anticipate even more. And then I'm going to have him jump in 3 frames. If you've rigged your character appropriately, it should look like that. So I'm going to scrub. Okay, it comes up. So we've anticipated the jump. We've jumped. I'm going to need to animate some target bones here. This is where some problems can happen. Target bones just don't seem to cooperate by themselves. So you got to freeze pose all the time. Right here, I want the target bones to stay, but up here, I'd like them to come with a little bit. Just a little. Right here, I'd like them to stay put. So let's talk about copying and pasting keyframes. So this is tricky. I'm going to select my target bone here and shift click my other target bone here. Okay, I have those 2 selected. Based on my selection, if I look at my timeline, the red area are my keyframes for those selected bones. So I can take a look. Okay, my selected bone translation right here, this keyframe has this information in it. If I copy and paste, that's going to keep those legs stuck to the ground for 1 more frame. Okay, copying and pasting is pretty valuable. I know it's complicated, but it's based on your selection. Okay, so maybe that comes up. Whatever you want to do there. And then he's going to come back down. Maybe we paste again, because that's where the feet are going to land. He's going to land back down there. Up. Maybe his body is up a little bit more. He's going to be straight-legged until he lands. I want his legs to be up a little bit more. So you can tweak all this stuff forever. Maybe they don't come down so soon. So he's landing there. And this is the follow-through. So I'm going to freeze pose here. Go forward a couple. And I'm going to follow through with a squat. Maybe his arms come up. Come up 2 frames. He's going to come up a little higher than he normally would. His arms come down. Go forward a couple more. And then he settles. Maybe his arms come down to normal. Let's take a look at that. So his legs got a little craziness in there. That can happen. Just ignore it if it does. Call me over. It's this weird quirk. Okay, so we got some anticipation and some follow through. He anticipates the jump, he jumps, he comes down, and he follows through. Switch layers make it really easy to switch between graphics, and if you've set your character up properly, you should have a few graphics inside of a switch layer. You go forward in time past frame 0, and there's a few ways to switch graphics. The first way is to right-click on the folder and click and select which mouth you want. You can see something's happened in the timeline, and I'll show you that in a second. The second way to switch is to go to Window, Switch Selection, and then you get a graphic representation of what's happening, so you can also switch at any point in time. Let's say if I wanted to switch again. The timeline is representing what's happening in the switch layer itself. These little widgets can be moved around or extended or shortened if you like. Let's say you switched it too soon, then you can move them around. So let's animate some switching of the mouth for this character. Let's say when he bends down, I want him to switch to the O mouth. Okay, so he's gonna go ooh, and then right here I want him to switch back to the normal mouth. Right click, grin. ooh, grin. Let's do the same thing. Save. Let's do the same thing with the eyes. So in my eye layer, I have open and blink. Let's say right here he blinks like he's preparing to jump. This is another part of anticipation that can help. He's going to blink, and then he's probably going to open his eyes right about there. Right click, open. So I've switched between graphics there. And if you wanted to move that around, let's say I didn't like how soon the mouth changes, maybe it changes right there, you can just click and drag those little widgets. There we go. Switch layers, nice and easy. Walking can be very complicated, but I'm going to try to make it nice and simple. We're going to take a few steps to the right, and then we're going to improve it gradually. But we're going to start with a very, very clunky style of movement that we're going to fine tune. You're going to be working with your target bones, these two bones here, and then also your control bone, but you're going to do that second. Why don't you go ahead and go towards 3 seconds and press Control F or Command F to freeze the pose. You got to freeze poses when you're doing walks with these target bones. They just don't cooperate if you don't. I like to work every 2 frames. With my Manipulate Bone tool, or Z, I'm going to press Shift. Actually, let's do this one. I'm going to take a step with this guy. And it's just going to go straight across for now. We're going to fine tune it in a bit. And then I'm going to move my control bone straight over, pressing Shift, so that his legs are going to create a triangle. So the control bone should be right in the middle of his 2 legs. And I'm going to freeze the pose. We're going to do a lot of freezing poses, so Command F or Control F is a nice little shortcut. Forward 2. I'm going to drag the control bone forward. And it should cross right there. And it's a bunch of repeating freeze pose. Forward 1, 2. Drag this bone over, this control bone over. Drag the control bone over. Freeze pose. 1, 2. Control bone over. Target bone over. Freeze pose. If we can do this all the way to about 4 seconds, that would be great. Freeze pose. And this will be maybe the last one. Maybe he takes one little tiny step at the end and then settles in. Freeze pose. So it looks really clunky right now, and that's okay. We just want to get the basic animation idea. Okay, now we're going to fine tune it. In between those 2 frames, I'm going to pick up the feet. And I'm also going to move the control bone up or down. When the person puts all their weight on one leg, they actually go up a bit. When they go down and they have both feet on the ground, they go down. So it's go forward 1 frame. This is going to be a problem because he's moving to the right. Let's see if we can fix that. Okay, we can fix that. Here's the trick to fixing this. Using the Transform Bone tool, you go to the left shin and you drag to the left so it does that. I'm going to zoom in because I'm starting to lose my detail here. Okay, so it's up. Maybe it's there, something like that. And the body's up. Forward, down. Forward, up. Forward, down. Forward, up. Let's see, I want that one. He's up, down. Gotta keep track of which one's which. Forward, up. Which step you're taking. Gets a little confusing. Down. You don't want it to come down too much. And this one was that little step. Just a little tiny step. Some of these poses I don't like. Like when he starts there, that's fine, but that one right there is weird. So I'm going to actually do that. That one's a little weird too. That's pretty cute. You can make him as bouncy as you want to, but if you follow that step, that's pretty good. Let's talk about anticipation. So maybe we help him anticipate a little bit. I'm actually going to drag this frame out a little bit, maybe 1 or 2 frames, so he can anticipate. He's gonna go down a little bit. Let's try that again. Down a little bit. There we go. Down a little bit. And maybe he's gonna rear back a little. I'm pressing Option and rotating in anticipation for this step. So he's gonna kind of rock back a little bit. Maybe he comes up. Maybe he's taking a bigger step on the next frame. And he's ready to walk. He's anticipating just over a few frames. It's nice and subtle, but it's going to help him move realistically. And then when he settles in here, maybe he does a little bounce. Just a little tiny one. Subtle, but it helps so much. It creates that realistic motion. Some advanced ideas include squash and stretch and smart bones. Squash and stretch we've learned about, but you can apply that idea to specific bones. So if I select my, let's say, main torso bone and I go up to bone constraints, this is going to be under squash and stretch right there. I've already set it to 2. So, and this is only in the Pro version, so if you have your debut, you're going to have to move computers. What I can do right here, let's say the character is anticipating to jump. Right here, if I used my transform bone tool and I clicked on the end of it, right there, it's just added another keyframe right there. And if I drag to the left, he's actually squashing and stretching a bit. So I can squash and stretch. He's gonna probably stretch this way. He might become normal here. If you're not sure where normal is, right here, scale, it should be 1. That's normal. That's the beginning point. I'm noticing my keyframes are not smooth because I have ease and out as my default, so I've got to do 2 things. I got to right click and change them to smooth, and then make sure that this default is smooth. I want that to happen. Okay, and then he's gonna go from normal to stretchy again, probably here. And he's gonna squash again, maybe stretch, and then go back to 1. Kind of like that. So we can do squash and stretch. It's nice and subtle, but it's going to help with that anticipation as well. The second part is smart bones. Smart bones are pretty complicated, but they can add some real charm to your animation. I've set up 3 smart bones where I can control the eyes with a separate bone. I can make him look left and right, up and down, or a combination of the 2. Pretty cool. I can also make things turn. It's the same idea. You're basically telling graphics to attach to a bone and be controlled by them. I'm not going to show you how to set those up. If you're curious about them, let me know and I can help you out with them. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to have him look over as he starts to walk. Over here, maybe he's fully turned. What we did is we freezed poses over here, so that can cause some problems because if I go forward 2 more frames, it's back to normal. I don't want it to do that. I want this bone and this bone to remain here from this point forward. So I have to select my bones, pressing Shift, go down to my red channel and delete these keyframes. There we go. Okay, so we have squash and stretch. We have some smart bones that are happening. If you're curious about those, let me know. You have to use the pro version. They are very advanced, so if you're curious, let me show you. Otherwise, there are many tutorials on how to do them. Rendering your video or your character out depends on what you're trying to do. If you would like to preview your animation, you can go to File, Preview Animation, and it'll run through the work area and it'll give you a quick video using bones about what your character looks like. This is a great way to take a look at this so far in real time. Another way that you might need to render this is as a video. So you go to File, Export Animation, you get this dialog box, all sorts of settings. I'm on a Mac, so it's going to look different than yours. You're probably going to have an AVI option over here, so you can render it as a video, and that's totally fine. Some settings to take a look at. Where to save it to? Do you save it to your desktop, or do you choose a folder? And what do you name it as? So you can choose a video format under there. If you wanted to bring it into After Effects and have the background, this gray area, to be clear, either you need to have QuickTime on your computers, which you don't in your classroom. I have it on my Mac, so that's kind of that's too bad that PCs don't have that. Or you can save it as an image sequence. This is the third type, image sequence. Similar to what you did with your stop motion, you're going to make a series of images. Use PNG as your preset. Make sure that these are anti-aliased and extra smooths are checked. Export to. I'm going to make a folder. This is critical. I'm going to call this character 1. And I'm going to save it to that folder. Choose folder, and I'm going to find character 1. And then character PNG is fine. The reason why I made another folder is so that all my images are saved to that folder. You can see it's populating there. If I didn't save it to a folder and I said save it to my desktop, you're going to have 60 images on your desktop all of a sudden. It's very, you got to pay attention to what's going on. And after this is done, this window will go away and you'll have a series of images that you can import into After Effects if you want that clear background. So it depends on what you are using this for. Your assignment, all you'll need to do is export a video. So you'll go File, Export Animation, and then choose a video format from this area right here, and that's what you'll turn in. Hope this was fun. Hope your character turned out well and you enjoyed some character animation.